books that priests confiscated and burned, books that monarchs sealed inside royal archives and never catalogued by name, books that scholars copied in secret and signed with false names to survive the consequences. The Vatican's Archivum Secretum holds manuscripts restricted since 1612, accessible to fewer than 200 researchers on Earth. We call them grimoires. And here is the part that almost nobody seems to want to discuss honestly. The warnings printed inside them are not deterrents, they are instructions. Every prohibition is a map. Every caution is a door left slightly open. Remember that as we go through what follows tonight. The names you must never pronounce, the sigils you must never trace, the pacts you must never sign. Welcome. Tonight we open 13 of these books. From each one, a single name, the entity its own author warned should never be called. 13 grimoires, 13 warnings. What follows is esoteric tradition and religious folklore. Read closely. I am not making metaphysical claims, but the same warnings surface, century after century, in manuscripts that were written on different continents, in different languages, by people who had no knowledge of each other's work. And some patterns persist for reasons we do not entirely understand. That matters now because these texts are not locked away in legend. The Bibliothèque Nationale de France holds restricted grimoire manuscripts that require institutional sponsorship to view. The British Library's Harley collection contains volumes still flagged for supervised access only. These are not relics. They are active objects inside living institutions, and scholars are still arguing about what to do with them. If the darker corners of esoteric history fascinate you, subscribe. Every week we read what was never meant to be read. Now, our first book is not European. It is not medieval in the way most people picture medieval. And when it was reprinted in 1985, governments across 3 countries moved to ban it within months of publication. That story starts more than 700 years earlier, in a city that was then the intellectual center of the known world. Travel to Cairo in the 13th century and you are standing at the center of the Islamic world's most ambitious project, the systematic organization of all hidden knowledge. It is here, around 1200 CE, that a Sufi scholar named Ahmad ibn Ali al-Buni began assembling what would become the most widely copied Arabic grimoire in history. The text is called Shams al-Ma'arif al-Kubra. The manuscript tradition is vast. Over 200 known copies survive, held in collections from the Bibliothèque Nationale de France to the Süleymaniye Library in Istanbul, where several volumes remain in restricted reading rooms. Al-Buni was not a fringe figure. He was a respected scholar of Sufi cosmology, and his book was, on its surface, a treatise on the properties of letters, numbers, and planetary seals. The legend, however, tells a different story about what the book actually does. According to the tradition surrounding Shams al-Ma'arif, the text contains a complete operational system for summoning intelligences tied to each of the 7 classical planets. The legend continues that al-Buni himself encoded the most dangerous invocations inside geometric diagrams, the planetary seals, so that a reader without the correct preparatory knowledge would see only mathematics. Supposedly, the seals are not symbols of power. They are, the tradition tells us, containers for it. And the tradition is very specific about what happens when an unprepared reader attempts to use them. But here is the line that has unsettled scholars and practitioners for 8 centuries. Al-Buni writes, in the opening section of the text, "He who reads without purification is consumed by what he seeks to illuminate." Read that again. "He who reads without purification is consumed by what he seeks to illuminate." Notice what that sentence does not say. It does not say you will fail to summon anything. It says you will succeed, and the result will consume you. That is not a warning against the book being ineffective. That is a warning against the book working exactly as designed. Not the symbol, the thing. The word Shams is Arabic for sun. Al-Buni chose that title deliberately. The sun illuminates everything, but look directly at it without preparation, and it does not enlighten you. It blinds you. The title is the thesis. Knowledge without the correct approach is not neutral. It is damage. Now, here is what the historical record actually shows. There is no documented case of a reader being supernaturally destroyed by Shams al-Ma'arif in the medieval period. The manuscript circulated widely through Sufi teaching networks, was copied by professional scribes, and was studied openly in certain scholarly circles for centuries. Al-Buni's own biography is largely undramatic. He died around 1225 CE, apparently of ordinary causes, in Alexandria. But what fascinates me about the legend is its internal logic. The book's protective mechanism, according to the tradition, is not a curse placed on the text from outside. It is the text itself, operating correctly on an unprepared mind. The warning and the danger are the same object. That logic became urgently relevant in 1985, when a mass-market Arabic printing of Shams al-Ma'arif was distributed across Egypt, Morocco, and parts of the Levant. Within months, religious authorities in all three regions moved to restrict or ban the edition. Reports of psychological disturbance and what local imams described as possession cases spiked in communities where the book had circulated. I am not asserting the book caused those events. The causes of psychological crisis are complex, documented, and human, but the institutional response was real, the bans were real, and the pattern of authority moving to suppress the text repeated itself, exactly as it had in the 13th century, exactly as al-Buni's own introduction had warned it would. 700 years later, the same reflex, the same fear, the same locked door. A text that predicted its own suppression across 8 centuries is not nothing. That is not magic, that is architecture. Now, let us travel from the sun-baked libraries of medieval Cairo to the cold stone of a Bohemian monastery. We are going to Prague, and then, eventually, to Stockholm. Because that is where this book ended up, and the journey it took to get there is almost as strange as the book itself. The Codex Gigas is a real manuscript. It is the largest surviving medieval manuscript in the world. It was produced sometime in the early 13th century, most likely at the Benedictine monastery of Podlajic in Bohemia, in what is now the Czech Republic. After passing through the hands of Emperor Rudolf II and surviving the chaos of the 30 Years' War, it was taken to Stockholm as war plunder in 1648, where it now lives in the National Library of Sweden. It weighs 165 pounds. When you open it flat, it measures nearly a meter across. The monks who copied ordinary books held them in their hands. Nobody holds this one. The legend attached to the Codex Gigas is specific, and it is old. The tradition tells us that a Benedictine monk named Hermann the Recluse broke his monastic vows sometime in the 13th century. His punishment was to be walled up alive. Facing death, the legend continues, Hermann made a bargain. He promised to create, in a single night, a book containing all of human knowledge, a monument so vast it would glorify the monastery forever. Supposedly, he could not finish it alone, and so he called on the devil himself for assistance. The devil completed the manuscript before dawn, and in gratitude, Hermann included a full-page portrait of his patron. That portrait is still there. It is unlike anything else in medieval manuscript tradition. A green-skinned figure, horns, ermine coat, a grinning face that looks almost pleased with itself. Medieval manuscripts contain demons as decoration, as margin figures, as symbols of sin. They do not contain single-page portraits of the devil rendered with care and apparent affection. This one does. But here is the detail in this manuscript that stops scholars cold. Open the Codex Gigas to the section on exorcism, and you will find this instruction, translated from the Latin. He who would drive out the unclean spirit must first become familiar with its nature, for a thing unknown cannot be commanded. Read that again. He must first become familiar with its nature, not fear it, not reject it, become familiar with it. I want you to notice what it does not say. It does not say, study it from a distance. It does not say, understand it, theoretically. Familiar. The word implies closeness, intimacy even. The text is suggesting that to expel something, you must first let it close enough to know, not the symbol, the thing. The name attached to the demonic tradition surrounding this manuscript is Lucifer, but the specific entity in the portrait has been identified by some scholars as a figure whose name derives from a much older root. The word Gigas itself is Greek, meaning giant, a name for something that exceeds normal scale. The book that dwarfs its reader, the knowledge that is too large for the person trying to hold it. Now, the skeptic in me needs to say this clearly. There was no single-night miracle. Scholars, including the manuscript specialist Pavel Spunar, have analyzed the handwriting and the ink distribution and concluded that the Codex Gigas was almost certainly the work of one scribe, yes, but over a period of decades, possibly 20 to 30 years of continuous labor. No pact was needed. One determined man, a lot of time, and a very large piece of vellum made from the skins of roughly 160 donkeys. That is the real story. But what fascinates me about the legend is what it reveals about how medieval people understood the relationship between knowledge and transgression. The idea that a book this comprehensive, this total, could only exist through a forbidden act, that the sheer ambition of it required something beyond human permission. A book so large it had to be carried by 2 people is not a warning. It is a monument to what happens when the desire to contain everything outgrows the vessel built to hold it. Step away from Stockholm and come with me to London. Specifically, to the British Library on Euston Road, where in the manuscript reading room, if you know the catalogue number, you can request a document that has been quietly reshaping Western occultism for 400 years. The Lemegeton, commonly called the Lesser Key of Solomon, exists in several manuscript versions, the most studied of which is Sloane, MS 2731, held at the British Library and dated to the 17th century. It is a compilation, not a single author work. Nobody wrote it. It accumulated, drawing from earlier Solomonic traditions and Renaissance-era ceremonial magic texts. The version that most people encounter today is the translation and edition published in 1904 by Samuel Liddell MacGregor Mathers, who brought it directly into the working practice of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. Aleister Crowley later revised it and distributed it further. From that point forward, the Lemegeton stopped being a rare manuscript and became a handbook. The central claim of the Lemegeton is this: Solomon, king of Israel, did not merely possess wisdom. The tradition tells us he possessed a brass vessel, a bronze seal, and the knowledge to trap 72 spirits inside that vessel and force them to perform his will. Supposedly, those spirits, known as the Goetic demons, each govern a specific domain. Some command armies, some teach philosophy, some reveal hidden treasure. The legend continues that Solomon bound them all, catalogued their names, their ranks, their seals, and their areas of authority, and that the Lemegeton is the surviving record of that catalogue. Each spirit comes with a sigil, a unique geometric seal, and a specific method of compulsion. The book does not ask you to believe in these spirits. It instructs you on how to control them, which is a very different proposition. Here is the line at the core of the binding ritual, a line that has been spoken aloud in ceremonies across 3 centuries. The text commands the evoked spirit directly. Thou art constrained to appear in a fair human shape, without deformity or torment. Let that sit for a moment. Constrained to appear in a fair human shape. The word constrained is doing enormous work there. This is not an invitation. It is not a prayer. It is a legal injunction. The text is written as if the practitioner has authority over the entity, not the other way around. I want you to notice what it does not say. It does not say the spirit will comply. It says the spirit is constrained. The assumption built into that word is that, without constraint, the shape would be something other than fair, something other than human, not the appearance, the default. The word goetia, the name given to this entire tradition, comes from the Greek goeteia, which derives from goes, a howler, a wailer. It described the sound made during the rite. The magic was not named for what it summoned. It was named for the sound made by the person doing the summoning, a name that is itself a description of the experience. No evidence exists that Solomon wrote any such document. The historical Solomon, if he existed as described, lived in the 10th century BCE. The traditions attributed to him in the Lemegeton draw from texts no earlier than the 1st century CE and were compiled in their current form over 1,000 years after his death. The attribution is a strategy, not a fact. But here is what fascinates me about that strategy. By placing Solomon's name on the binding commands, the text is claiming that the authority to compel these entities is ancient, royal, and divinely sanctioned. You are not a person performing magic. You are an executor of a 3,000-year-old mandate. The psychological architecture of that is remarkable. The power of a name borrowed from a king is that it makes the person holding it feel, for a moment, like one. If you were to travel to Rome today and walk into the Vatican Apostolic Library, you would find reading rooms open to credentialed researchers, rare books on open shelves, scholars consulting illuminated manuscripts from the 9th century without gloves. The Vatican, for all its mystique, is surprisingly accessible, except for certain items. Certain items are held in the restricted section, the Archivio Segreto, now formally renamed the Vatican Apostolic Archive, and one of those items is a copy of the book we are about to discuss. The Grand Grimoire, also known as the Red Dragon, exists in several printed editions, the earliest of which dates to approximately 1750, though some scholars of French occult history, including Auguste Vaillant, argue the manuscript tradition behind it is considerably older. It is not a handwritten rarity. It was printed, distributed, sold, and still the Vatican locked a copy away. The book's central operation concerns a single entity named Lucifuge Rofocale, described as the Prime Minister of Hell. the demon appointed by Lucifer to govern all earthly matters. What makes the Grand Grimoire unique among major grimoires, and what has led figures from Eliphas Levi onward to call it the most dangerous book in existence, is this. It contains a pact template, printed verbatim. Fill in your name, sign it. The book provides the contract. The legend surrounding the Grand Grimoire is precise and businesslike. The tradition tells us that the ritual described in its pages requires the practitioner to go to a crossroads at midnight, draw a specific triangle on the ground, and call Lucifuge Rofocale by his full name. Supposedly, the demon will resist appearing, because the legend tells us he despises light and human contact. The practitioner must persist, threatening him with the authority of higher powers until the entity relents. The pact offered is simple, by occult standards. The demon provides wealth, knowledge, and worldly success. In return, the practitioner's soul is delivered at death. The legend continues that the pact must be signed in the practitioner's own blood. The Grand Grimoire does not leave this to imagination. It provides the exact wording. Here is the line that has disturbed theologians and occultists alike for 2.5 centuries. The pact template reads, "I promise Lucifuge Rofocale to reward him in 20 years with that which belongs to me in this world." Read that again. That which belongs to me in this world. Not a soul, not a life. That which belongs to me. The language is deliberately vague. I want you to notice what it does not specify. It does not say what the payment is. It leaves the definition to the creditor. That is not a contract. That is a blank check with your signature at the bottom. Not a bargain. A trap. The name Lucifuge Rofocale is constructed from Latin roots. Lucifuge comes from lux fugere, meaning he who flees the light, a being defined not by what it is, but by what it cannot endure, a name that is itself a description of its limits. No credible historical record supports the claim that the Grand Grimoire predates the 18th century in printed form. Eliphas Levi, the 19th century French occultist who called it the most dangerous book in existence, was a showman as much as a scholar, and his assessments should be read accordingly. The Vatican's restricted copy proves institutional anxiety, not supernatural potency. But what fascinates me about the pact template is its legal structure. Whoever designed this text understood that the most frightening contracts are the ones where the terms are left open. Every lawyer knows this. Every con artist knows this. The Grand Grimoire put that principle into ritual form and handed it to people who were desperate enough to sign. The most dangerous line in any document is the one that looks simple but leaves the meaning entirely up to someone else. Step back from everything you have just heard. Every one of these books, the Shams, the Codex, the Lemegeton, the Grand Grimoire, shares the same underlying structure. Someone went somewhere most people do not go. They came back. And then they wrote it down. They wrote them the way a man who has crossed a minefield draws a map for the next traveler. Not so the next traveler can admire the landscape, so the next traveler can live. The manuscripts are still there. Munich, London, the Vatican. Catalogued, restricted, read mostly by people who do not believe a word of them. So here is where we end. Do not read what you cannot put down. Do not speak what you cannot unsay. Do not open what you cannot close. The warning is the oldest form of knowledge. My friends, wherever you are, look carefully at what you read before you read it. If you made it this far, subscribe and leave your thoughts below.